Greetings to you and welcome to our daily Devo for Tuesday, January the 9th. January the 9th. Our Devo for today is entitled The Peril of Pursuing Social Status. An appropriate sounding title for today, the world we're living in today. The Peril of Pursuing Social Status. Luke 22, 24 through 30, and John 13, once again, 1 through 17. John 13, verses 14 and 15 are the verses quoted here. Now that I, this is Jesus speaking, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. The Roman world was very class conscious. Things haven't changed. And the competitive interest in social rank had rubbed off on the disciples. On a night when we expect the focus to be on Jesus, we find the disciples focused instead on themselves. Luke states it baldly. A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was considered to be greatest. Luke 22, 24. It was an argument they had regularly. Who's the greatest? Who's got the most position in our group here? This dispute was likely prompted by the table. Jesus and the disciples were reclining around a wooden triclinium, as we looked at yesterday. This was a low U-shaped table around which the diners reclined with their feet extending away from the table. When it was time for the meal, the diners took positions around the three outside edges. So far, the table sounds unusual, but benign. That is, until we realize that in the Roman world, social status was tied to the wing at which one dined. One wing was reserved for the host family and special guests. The other two wings were for those of either higher or lower social status. Those on the lower status side of the table were expected to serve. Luke 22, 27. Such practical elements of the evening meal triggered the dispute over who would sit where and who would serve. Jesus gently upbraids them for these Gentile-like attitudes and follows up with an enacted lesson. He speaks of the titles that the Gentile world used to designate social status among themselves. Kings demand honor through force. Benefactors garner public honor by providing support for those of lower social rank. But you, he says to his disciples, are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. Luke 22, 26. Then the disciples watched slack-jawed as Jesus enacted the lesson. He did exactly what a servant in the household would do, removed his outer garment, wrapped himself with a towel, and washed their feet. Jesus had the titles of Lord and teacher, but he never allowed those signs of social rank to impede the humble service that was the hallmark of his ministry and that are to be the hallmark of our own. It's really something that as followers of Jesus, we need to be really aware of. What does it look like to be a citizen of his kingdom? The disciples were indoctrinated already with position, with title, with being recognized. The Pharisees lived that in their religion. They prayed to be heard. They gave their money in order to be seen. Everything they did was for being seen, and for people then to think more highly of them. And the disciples were caught up in that. We see it regularly in questions that arise and attitudes that get displayed as they follow Jesus. They can't believe he would sit down at a well, not just with a woman, but with a Samaritan woman, without anybody else around. Oh, wow, forbidden. Cultures around the world and throughout history have had that kind of attitude about who fits where. Jesus will tell a parable about going to a feast and just assuming you get to sit at a table of honor, a seat of honor, and then the shame that comes when you're asked to move because that actually belongs to somebody else, evidently somebody more important than you. His advice is take the lowest seat, and if somebody wants to move you up, let them. It's interesting, and I think appropriate that our author mentions this. What should have been a night all about Jesus, they made it about themselves. They made it about themselves. Even Peter, as Jesus is washing other feet, and he comes to Peter, Peter says, nope, you're not doing that for me. Is that because you're not lower, you're higher? Is that he wanted to be seen as more righteous? Maybe I'm not really sure. I can't say, but it's part of being humble, just like Jesus was humble. I, your Lord and Master, have done this. Now, what should your responses look like? How should you be living? How should you be serving each other? Later on in this chapter, again, we had intended to preach on it this past Sunday. Lord willing, it'll be preached on this coming Sunday. But he says to them about loving one another. And look at my example. That's how you're to love each other. Sacrifice, service, humility, not boasting, not puffing yourself up. The church has been filled with that down through church history. It hasn't changed. There are still those who want place and position, who want notoriety, who want to be acclaimed, who want to be seen as being important. But that's not the kingdom we're citizens of, folks. If we're followers of Jesus, we are citizens of a kingdom where the first are last and the last are first. And we serve with that mentality. We don't do what we do to be seen, patted on the back, acknowledged. We don't get to build a big old resume that people can be impressed by. We don't serve within the body of Christ because we want to gain attention. We serve because that's what our master did. The one we follow served. The peril of pursuing social status. God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Let's make sure that's our goal. Let's make sure that's what we desire above all else, to live like that and to be willing to serve. Even those, as to use a term from another culture, even if somebody else is considered by others to be of a lower caste, we serve them. Because you can't see yourself as better than them and still consider yourself a follower of Jesus. Blessings to you today. Let's serve the Lord. Let's be willing to serve the lowest of the low, depending. I mean, I know that's a cultural term, maybe. That's how our culture sees others. But we're not like that. We're not like our culture. That's the peril. the peril of using the social status of our world to measure by. Again, blessings to you today on this Tuesday.